Hello, and welcome to another episode of the So Are We Doing Life podcast. I'm Ty, I'm your host, and today we are going to talk about school because it's that time of year again. You know, that time of year when we're getting into the last days of summer. Parents are starting to prepare their kids for school. They're going school shopping for clothes, for supplies, and figuring out schedules and just all the things that come with going back to school. This is also the time of year for all of us non-traditional parents, all of us parents who are outside of the box, um, get a lot of judgment. I will say that. So let me first start by saying don't I don't subscribe to, I guess, anything that's like the social norm. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I am an out of the box thinker. I allow my child to have out of the box thinking to a point, nothing harmful or anything like that, nothing harmful, nothing disrespectful. I allow my child to pursue things that they are interested in instead of pushing them to where I think they should be and telling them that's the only way that they can do life. I want them to understand the things that I understood later in life much earlier and understand that they can pursue those things earlier. And with that, let me first tell you how we got into a non-traditional school setting. So my child did actually go to a traditional school. When they were younger, they went to a private school. And what happened during that time was I continuously, me and another parent, another child's parents, were continuously being called almost every day. So much to the point where we kind of set up a schedule of like, okay, on these days, it's easier for the school to call me. So we're just going to, whoever this day, we're just going to give the schedule to the school. And this is the day of which parent shows up. So we kind of worked out a schedule of which parent was going to go pick up the kids or go and like figure out what happened for the day. Because, most children get to the point where they're bored and they do a couple of things. Either they're bored, like they're that student that I would get bored in class and then I would sit there silently, absolutely bored out of my mind because I was afraid to get in trouble. That is not these two children. They also are not the two kids that get in trouble, got bored and like talked all day. They're the two kids that got in trouble and did some Zack and Slater type schemes in elementary school. And not like, super massively get yourself into dangerous situations, but just like how did you even think of that? And one day the director, because it was a private school, the director pulled us aside, both me and the other parents, and she told us, I would love to say that this is a behavioral problem and we can fix it. She said, but that's not the problem. The problem is that there's nothing wrong with your children. The problem is they're bored. And we can't, per policy, per regulation, per law, this is as far as we can go. We can't do anything else with them. We've moved them up. They're already advanced in their class and they're still bored. And there's nothing we can do to help them get past this. They're not really learning anything. And so you guys may want to think of some alternative methods, some alternative schooling, some different options, because this isn't going to work and this is just how it's going to be. And then they're going to be in a situation where they're never really quite learning anything new, maybe just a little bit of new material, but they're always going to be ahead, but ahead to a point that is not going to be beneficial to them. And so fast forward to today, and we ended up landing on homeschool. We don't do like, I think we also, even with homeschool, we do probably a method that I think even with other homeschool parents, they're always like, wow, okay, wow, I never thought of that. My child goes to homeschool online. They attend online classes, and it's a STEM school. It is a online STEM school, science, technology, engineering, math, all of that, right? Because that's what they are interested in. And I want to flourish that. And so they do go, all of their classes are based on that. They do like the traditional classes, English, math, all of that stuff. And then they also do like coding and all that other stuff that I have no idea what they're talking about because it all just looks like numbers and symbols to me. So um, and they absolutely love it. They adore it. They are challenged. And I love that because I saw the difference. not, I won't say right away because we kind of had to figure it out, right? Because at the beginning we were kind of working through how are we going to do this. And I will say that homeschooling is not easy. It is definitely any type of non-traditional school is not easy because one, you have to have that support system or be able to put in place a support system or find something that works for your child, right? Or your children, because everything doesn't work for all children. I do say that I know some other parents who homeschool and they will be the first one to tell you that the way that my child goes to school would not work for their children. And I will tell you that the way that some of their children do homeschool and they do it with their children would not work for my child. My child definitely needs to be told this is the structure, this is what you're going to do, these are your assignments, you have to finish these by this time and date. And there needs to be that type of structure in place for them to stay on task. But as long as that's in place, they're fine, they're good, they do whatever, right? They'll do what they need to do. But also they needed something that stimulates them and stimulates their mind and helps them learn. My child does well in the subjects that they don't like because they know that they get to do a coding class when they're done. They know they get to do this math class. And because they love math and coding and science and all that stuff so much, they do really well in their other classes because it's like an incentive for them. Even though they absolutely don't like it, they find it completely boring, they still go above and beyond and do it. And I think that that's kind of, the thing that you need to do is like figure that out. But when I say it's this time of year, what I mean is, with all of that said, this is the time of year when people who their children go to traditional school settings, they don't understand homeschool, they don't understand Montessori schools, they don't understand anything that is different from what they have been told and taught is the way that they're supposed to do it. And for them, this is a time of year when I personally just dread it a bit because at first, like I try my best to not be annoyed because I understand that they're not doing it out of annoyance. This is just their thought process that they're thinking. Um, but after about the 10th time that someone asked me, are you going to allow your child to experience regular school this year? It starts to become a bit annoying. And I always remind them my child has experienced regular school, and that's why we know that this is better. Because my child did have that experience and my child didn't like it, and I didn't like the results of it. And I think that like we have to be open and understand that every choice that you make is the right choice for you, is the right choice for your child. And every choice that other people make is the right choice for them and their family and their children. And we should not judge those, you know, those decisions because it's not our place to decide what is right for a particular family. And, everyone doesn't have the ability to homeschool. I am very lucky and very blessed that I have the ability to homeschool. And I think that that is one of the reasons because I have a big support team, a big support system. And I will say my parents have played a huge role in me being able to homeschool. And I think that part of that was because my brothers and I went to traditional school, and all three of us were extremely bored and we all handled it very differently. I think for me, I was the only quiet one that didn't get in trouble. One of my brothers definitely was the talker after he got done with his work. And my other brother was actually my child. My child is my other brother, just like a younger version, getting into the trouble, getting into the schemes, like figuring out something to stimulate their mind because school wasn't stimulating their mind and they were bored and they were in class done with their work while everybody else was working and they needed something to do. And so because of that, I think it was really easy for my parents to jump in and say, okay, let's figure this out, let's help you. And at that time, I'd relocated closer to my family. I didn't live that close to them at that time. But as we were dealing with all of this, when my child was going through these ups and downs in school, and I spoke to my mother about, what the director said to me. She was like, okay, well, what needs to be done? And I was like, well, I was thinking of homeschool, but I don't know how I'm going to do that because I'm working. And, I was trying to figure that out. And I have to give my parents all the credit in the world because they really stepped up and helped me be able to make that happen. But I just want to acknowledge that just because you don't agree doesn't mean that you don't agree with something or you don't understand doesn't mean that it's wrong. And I also want people to understand that homeschool is not the homeschool of yesteryear. It's not even the same thing as when I was a child. Like had I been homeschooled as a child, I don't think I would have had the same experiences that my child gets to have or children nowadays are able to have. And the reason that I say that is because nowadays you have co-ops. And for those of you who are unaware what co-ops are, I will give you, or any of these terms, I will definitely tell you. But if you have any more questions, please, please jump in the comments, send me a private message, whatever you want to, and just ask me any questions because I am definitely open to discussing this more. But a lot of their homeschool co-ops, and co-ops are where students are able to, homeschool students are able to be taught a class in a group setting, in a classroom setting, or with other students. Usually, depending on how the co-op is set up, other parents are teaching the class. They're teaching whatever subjects. They're teaching one or two subjects. You're teaching one or two subjects. And everybody's kind of teaching what they're really good at, or what they have experience in. And I think it's really helpful to help the children socialize with one another, to help children understand the classroom setting, to help children kind of get a different perspective of someone teaching them besides their parents. And I think that all of those things are important, especially for children who are homeschooled, because they need to be able to function in a world where it's not just catered to their experience, right? Like they need to be able to have experiences that are a little bit more difficult for them to learn in, but also they need to be able to have that experience that they thrive in. And I think that forcing your child to stay in a traditional school setting when you actually do have other options is not necessarily exposure, at least from my point of view. Again, these are my personal opinions. For me, that is more of a hindrance than exposure. I think exposing them to other things, but not forcing them in that situation is what allows them to thrive, right? Like letting them see that this is something that happens in the real world, but you don't have to subscribe to that. You don't have to be in this box. You can do things your way. You can find a way to do things your way. You can find a way to make the world productive for yourself without just believing that you have to do it this way and this is the only way, because there are a lot of ways to get to that finish line, right? And I think that like during this time of year, even Montessori schools, I know I have quite a few friends whose children attend Montessori schools, and I see that they have the same type of pushback that I get. And it surprises me because their children are going to a building, to school, going somewhere, right? They're leaving the house and going somewhere. Um, and people still have these negative things to say because they don't understand it. And it baffles me because, like, instead of criticizing, I think that just having those questions, having that conversation, I think people would be really surprised if they knew how much homeschool children are exposed to, how much Montessori students are exposed to, how much other students who are just in non-traditional school settings are exposed to. My child gets to travel when we want to. We don't have to stay in one place because all they have to do is log on to their classes. My child is exposed to the morals that I want them to be exposed to. Instead of just getting all of that peer pressure, they're not exposed to bullying. And I know that there's this thought process out there that people need to be bullied. I absolutely disagree, especially in 2023. I think that teaching your child not to be a bully is much more important than your child experiencing being bullied. I think teaching your child to stand up for themselves in a way that is productive for society is much better, right? But I know that there are a lot of people that are probably going to come at me and tell me that they disagree. And that's okay. You're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion. But this time of year always makes me a little restless because I know that it's coming. I know the questions are coming. I know people are going to say, well, aren't you going to let them experience this? Don't you think they're missing out? I don't. My child can travel whenever we want to. We don't have to wait for school breaks. My child gets to experience real world things like when I go grocery shopping or things like that. My child is able to see those things in a different way than maybe your children can, like meaning your children, meaning people whose children are not involved in that, especially with like certain, depending on how you homeschool, sometimes that's part of it, is like teaching your child how to live in the real world. And in my experience, I have noticed that the majority of homeschool students are actually much more adjusted to the real world because their exposure is different. They're not being oversaturated with all of these things that you're oversaturated with when you're in public school, right? Or when you're in even private school, when you're in that traditional school setting, you're being oversaturated with all of these things. Everything is coming at you at once. Peer pressure is coming at you. And I think it's easier for you to help build that foundation, that strength, that sense of self, especially during that horrible tween stage of puberty. Like it's better for you, I think easier for you, not better. I would say I think it's a little bit easier to build that sense of self because there's a lot less peer pressure and I'm not saying there's not peer pressure. I'm just saying that I think in general the environment for homeschool students are different. Even with each other, because as I said before, you can do co-ops. They have homeschool sports, they have homeschool dances, they have homeschool proms, they have homeschool field trips. There are a lot of things that you can do when you are in a non-traditional setting. Homeschool in particular, I don't want this to just be about homeschool. I'm talking about homeschooling because that is what I do. That is what I have the most knowledge on. That is what I've been doing for years. And, I realize it is very successful. My child does volunteer work when they can. My child does, other activities. My child does extracurricular activities. My child does the things that they're interested in without just the extra, you know? Even when you look at kids in school, sometimes they don't play sports with school, they play sports with outside leagues. Like, think of it the same way. That's basically how homeschool is set up. Like, they get to do these sports and they're not tied to, oh, you can only do it if you're at this school. And for us, it's been very successful. My child is 12 and my child is going into or is in high school. And they're on their level, like intellectually, but they're also around children their age. They're not around a bunch of, 15 and 16-year-olds. They're around a bunch of other 12-year-olds who are also on the same grade level. And I think that that's important to note too, because when a child is in a more traditional school setting and they're way ahead of themselves like that, and they are able to skip up, they're now around these children or these other, teenagers and exposed to things that they may not have been exposed to quite so early because this is the environment that they're in and this is the environment that they have to be in order to be where they are intellectually. And I think that that's kind of an important thing too, because at the end of the day, yes, my child is mentally intelligent, but emotionally, my child is still 12 because they're 12. And that's just how it is. They're 12 and puberty happens. And this would be like the normal, that middle school range when you're just like this kid who woke up this morning, let me find out, you know? And I just think that we need to normalize that it's okay for people to have non-traditional settings. And what we need to look at is, instead of criticizing someone who's doing something different from us, instead of saying, oh, your child goes to traditional school, that's horrible. Oh, your child goes to homeschool, that's horrible. Oh, your child goes to Montessori school, that's horrible, or whatever it is that you do. If you want to know more about it, if you have questions, ask the questions. Don't just assume that what you think you know is the truth or is, what, because you don't know what you don't know, you don't know. And, or I think I said that wrong. You don't know what you don't know. That's what I meant to say. You don't know what you don't know. And I think that's really important to note, is that you have no idea what it's really like. You have no idea what this person is doing, what this student is doing. And I think that just in general, for me, moving into this method, moving into homeschool, doing this non-traditional method originally started as a way to keep my child in a space where they were always learning and thriving, because I remember being that kid who was bored. I remember watching my brothers be those children who were bored, and even some of my friends. And I promised myself that if I ever became a parent, and my child was in that situation, we would explore different options and see what's out there. And in exploring those options, we finally, after trial and error, we found something that worked and something that we all like. And my kid definitely loves homeschool, and I don't think would trade it for the world. But I just think that, you know, you have to find what works for you. And you have to understand that being in a traditional school setting is not for everyone, just like being in a traditional 9 to 5 is not for everyone. I quickly learned that just being an entrepreneur, 9 to 5 is not something that everybody signs up for. I mean, I literally have worked with people who are like, I have a 4 hour work week and I refuse to work more than that, period. And that's how they built their whole business, right? And I think that a lot of these kids are probably the same kids who would have done well in a non-traditional school setting. Um, or and some of them were actually in non-traditional school settings. And I just think it's important to acknowledge that, like, instead of coming at all of these parents who homeschool or non-traditional school their children, don't just attack, don't just say, oh, uh, are you going to allow your child to experience that? Because at the end of the day, that just annoys us. No matter how great our heart is, how open our heart is, how nice we are, it definitely becomes annoying after about the third or fourth time. And then unfortunately, the person who tends to get the sassy answer is not, they didn't do anything wrong. It's just that they're the fourth or fifth person that has, you know, posed this question to you. And at this point, you're just annoyed with the question. And so I will say, yes, you know, don't take it personally when someone gives you that sassy answer. They're probably just annoyed because you're not the first or second person or even third person who has asked them that question. But at the same time, if you're curious, if you want to know more, ask them about it, because your thoughts and your perception are probably so far from the reality of the situation that um like you couldn't even imagine what their child does. The experiences that they have are probably so far from reality. We are able to, as I said, we started this off because my child was not flourishing, and it has just been a blessing because it allowed us to do a lot of things that I didn't think would, I like never even crossed my mind would be something that we would, you know, be able to do. We do a lot of traveling. We are able to um go places, experience things that we wouldn't be able to experience otherwise, because we're not stuck to that school schedule, because we're not stuck to, you know, school activities or school whatever, like that cookie cutter box of you need to fit into this mold. We're not stuck to that. And so my child is also able to do some extracurricular activities that if they were in traditional school they wouldn't be able to do because they wouldn't have time. And so I just encourage you to, instead of coming at people with the, are you going to allow them to do this? If you have questions, say, oh, you homeschool, what is that like? Oh, you insert non-traditional school here. What is that like? And instead of judging, ask questions. Um, Tell them that you're curious. Tell them that you'd like to know more about it. That you don't know people who do it, or you don't really have conversations with people in your life who do that, and kind of start taking just a different view. But you know, maybe your mind will change of how you see it, and maybe it won't. Maybe you'll still think that it's a bad option. Maybe you'll still have your beliefs that, you know, children who homeschool are, you know, what I often hear is that they're not social. They lack skill, regular life skills. And I will personally say that I think the exact opposite is true, that they're very social, that they have amazing life skills because they live those life skills every day while other children are in traditional school settings. Um, you know, maybe you will change your mind and maybe you won't. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you change your mind or not. At the end of the day, you still have to respect that that is what that person wants to do. And instead of coming at them with an attack, come with them with curiosity and a place of openness and reception, and being receptive to whatever they have to tell you. Well, again, I welcome any comments or any questions. I definitely welcome any feedback from from other parents who homeschool and other parents who are just doing non-traditional. I would love to hear if your children don't homeschool, but also don't go to a traditional home setting. I would love to hear more about how you school out of the box. And until next time, please stay tuned for our next episode.